Follow the Path. The Bears Grove is adult-level discussion of role-playing as a storytelling art at samchupmedia.com.
Hello, once again, this is Sam. I'm in the car, and welcome to the Bears Grove podcast. I'd like to talk today a little bit about some game design ideas that I had as a result of reading some other games that I've seen on itch. Itch, if you haven't been there yet, is a really interesting place. It was originally set up for video games, computer games, that kind of thing. But it's evolved to include tabletop role-playing games. Or tabletop games in general. There is a game I started reading today called 4 Points. F-O-U-R points, and I'll try to have the URL for that in the show notes. It's an interesting story game engine kind of thing. The designer has set it up as a system resource document for a open source kind of gaming situation. It's Creative Commons. They have a lot of description as to what they feel is appropriate to use the game with and that sort of thing. So it's not a totally open license, but it is a license, and it doesn't seem to cost you anything unless you want to utilize the logo for the game, which, I can totally understand that. The game talks about it is a spin points or roll the dice situation. Each time you come to a challenge of some kind, you can either spend points from a pool of points in an area of your character's expertise, or you can roll a die 6, and it's a 50-50 chance to not have to spend the points but still get the same success, or to have negative consequences. So it's a pretty straightforward game design. I find the presence or absence of point systems in the middle of play typically means that people just don't spend those points. I call this the Scrooge problem, because players get really miserly over the points, and they don't want to get rid of any of them. They want to keep them all. Same thing goes for fate points in fate core system. Same thing goes for points in inspiration in D&D 5th edition, right? A lot of people just won't spend that point. It drives me crazy because I want them to spend the point. I want them to input into the story. I want them to have a great effect. And they don't. So I have to just wait until they actually do. Every so often I'll remind them, because I think it's important to remind the player, hey, you have this resource, you have it tapped. When will you be tapping that, you think? Because my game has been built on the supposition that you will be spending these points, right? So every game has trade-offs, and I get that. You have a benefit and you have a liability. For example, the storyteller system. the original World of Darkness. I'm not up on the recent changes to that system, so please forgive me. But the original World of Darkness had a very wonky dice pool situation where the more points you got in something, the more dice you had to roll, the greater the opportunity you had to fail miserably. And it was a downside. I mean, I'm just going to go right ahead and say that. It was a downside. From a pure probability standpoint, it was a downside. However, it worked originally for Vampire, the first of the Storyteller games, because it was expected that vampires are going to screw up magically. They're going to screw up majestically. And they're going to have terrible things happen to them because they're evil people. That was the, underlying, statement about vampires that was built into, not the game itself. I don't think you'll see that, except for a beast I am, lest a beast I become. But you will see it in the dice mechanics, because no matter how powerful you are, you're going to screw up major big time at some point. The dice are against you. Okay. Now, if you're smart, what you'll do is you'll split your dice pool a lot and do multiple things at once. The sweet spot is 4 to 5 dice, and that will be okay, right? 4 to 5 dice, and you're going to be all right. It's only when you get to 6, 7, 8, and more, you start to really run into possibility to basically botch your roll. So, and that's also why Mage has a limitation on the number of dice you can roll for magic, because they want you to not have those huge botches. I mean, botches are still pretty punishing in that game, but yeah. So anyway, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Everything has a trade-off. On one hand, we had the Storyteller game where we did away with character classes per se, and we had 3 categories of abilities, attributes, if you will, and we were rating everybody on a 1 to 5 scale, which is natural. It's something that you and I understand pretty well. 5-star restaurant, 5 dot in strength. It's probably the strongest guy around, right? So that was the benefit. There was all this simplicity, and you didn't have to, in leveling those characters, you just added a dot here or there, or you banked them. You banked your experience for a future upgrade that you want to do. But the downside is the dice were just terrible. And they fixed that, I believe, in later editions. I don't know for sure. I don't know. I haven't looked at that. So, for me, the 4 points system would be great if I could train some players into not being Scrooges, and allowing them to go ahead and spend the points so they can succeed at things for certain. There's a lot of benefit in knowing you can succeed. It's an absolute yes, you will succeed if you spend these points. Sometimes you might have to spend more points to succeed at really incredible things, but you will succeed. And that's the nice thing about that system. The downside is it's that 50-50 coin flip if you don't have any points left. And if you lose all your points, if you lose points in every attribute, like you have no points left, you're dead, I think. I think that's how you die. I forgive me if I'm wrong. I don't mean I'm not intending to represent this game system poorly. So my point, and I do have one, is that when you enter into a game design, the important things about that game is, to my mind, empowering your players to make choices that affect the outcome of the story. And that's the kind of the root engine, if you will, in games that I like. And I want that for my games. So anything that takes away from that power, that basically takes a player out of the mix, is going to inhibit your game. And I think as a DM, when I'm playing this kind of game, I want to allow folks a chance to continue. Okay? The classic thing that happens in some games is that you run out of hit points and that's it. You're knocked out, you're dead. That's not going to be empowering. What if instead they just suffered a setback and now something else has to be done? Or now at some point in the future a favor will be called in. Or now there's other things happening in the background that you didn't know about as a result of your failure. I think that sort of thing is a powerful idea. And I think that when we diverge from this concept, we move away from the wargaming roots of TTRPG, right? Because where do hit points come from? They come from the wargaming world, right? They come from the ideas you have markers on a board, and the markers are maneuvering for strategic and tactical reasons, and you can be hit with bad weather, and that will take you out of your turn. There's a number of different reasons why in a war game, why you can't pick up on the people around you, like you don't spot them, or you haven't spotted them in enough time, and so they vanish again into the fog of war. All of those things take away the autonomy of the player, which is great. It's fine. That's what everybody signs up for when they play a war game. That's okay. But when you're playing a role-playing game where the point is to make a cool story with your friends and to have everyone participate, everyone who wants to participate, I think that you have to support those players both from a system matters point of view and from a refereeing / storytelling point of view. So I want you to think about that. and maybe consider playing 4 Points. It's an interesting game. And that leads me to my second topic today, which I've already gone over my 15 minutes. I apologize. So I'll have to do another podcast another time. But just so I remember, the second topic is going to be about how to find people to play games other than Dungeons and Dragons. And if you have any ideas for that, please hit me up. My email address is sam@samchutmedia.com. And I think that's pretty much all I have for you today. I really appreciate you listening. And if you have any other questions or you have any comments, please go ahead and leave them on my podcast or send me an email. Also, be very grateful for you if you wouldn't mind, giving us a decent review on whatever podcast platform you're on. And thanks so much for your time listening today, and sweet dreams when you get them. Bye-bye.